Now let's go ahead and welcome to the program, speaking of China, speaking of the effort here at home to safeguard what is all of that is pure about American manufacturing. We're going to go ahead and welcome in from the shop floor, Justin Baucum, Isembard, USA. All right, now entering the steam zone, we have Justin Baucum, the GM of Isembard. He's not cosplay manufacturing. He's not dabbling in reindustrialization. This is the real deal. Justin, from special operations to the shop floor, tell us the journey you've been on. What is driving you to be standing right in front of that big old American flag today?
Well, first off, Noah, kudos on nailing the name the first time. Both my last name, people like to throw in like an L for some reason. And then Isembard, the most common pronunciation is like Isengard from like Lord of the Rings. They're not affiliated in any way, but I can see where it comes from. But yeah, I got involved with Isembard. First kind of conversations were just after the new year, and then came on board fully in May of this year. And so this is still relatively new for me. Prior to joining Isembard, I hadn't thought about manufacturing at all. It was just kind of like a thing that happened somewhere in a facility. What really attracted me to it, and I think maybe starting with just like the industry as a whole, is that manufacturing seemed to be this unexplored area for me, obviously as an individual, but there were just all sorts of opportunity. And so something from the military that we talked a lot about is like target-rich environments, which just means there's a bunch of opportunity. And in my first conversation with Alexander Fitzgerald, who's the founder and CEO, I think our first introduction was like 15 minutes, and I walked away from that conversation being like, I want to join this company and I want to learn about manufacturing. And I told him, it wasn't with the intent of like, hey, please interview me further and all that stuff, but it was like a genuine, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I think the vision of what you're trying to build is extraordinary, and I don't think a lot of people are doing the stuff that you're doing. And so to be a part of that mission, I like to say, when I was in the military, I was hyper-focused on whatever mission set that we were dealing with. It was like mission first, men, like the team, and then me comes last. And so that's kind of a philosophy that I've carried post-military. But quite frankly, in other places that I've been in, it's always been kind of like, this is interesting, but I'm not really feeling that sense of purpose. And here I very much do. There's a really clear mission. It transcends just like the four walls that we're standing in. We're doing something that hopefully has much more long-lasting implications on both sides of the Atlantic, being, having activity in the UK where we're headquartered, and then the side of the business I'm leading here in the States.
Yeah, so take us through the nitty-gritty for someone who is totally never been in a manufacturing floor, spends their whole time coding.
Yeah.
Tell us what you guys are making and how it works.
Yeah, I think an important thing is to help people have just kind of the right mental model or visual representation. So for me, and I found this to be somewhat true of a lot of folks that aren't directly connected to the industry, my mental model for what manufacturing looked like was like an assembly line of maybe cars getting made and people pulling levers, and like a giant, maybe like 1 million square foot facility. And that's absolutely an aspect of manufacturing. Like cars are made that way. But what we're doing is within the confines of what's typically referred to as like a machine shop, job shop, any of those variations. And we employ very specific manufacturing methods at this point. We'll continue to expand, but the ones where you see the biggest range of capability are one through milling, which is just like extracting a bunch of pieces of metal from a larger hunk of metal to turn it into the shape or component that you need. And then the other machine, I actually have one over here, is a mill turn, and so like a lathe, so spins, and then pieces get removed, and again, same outcome. There's a component that is useful in some way, shape, or form. For folks that haven't had the benefit of stepping into one of these places, it basically goes, raw materials come in, they get cut down to whatever size that you need to roughly fit into the machine. The machine does its magic. There's a lot that goes into that. But then the desired output is that you now have a component to something that you can put into, let's say, like an aerospace type platform. Maybe that's a rocket or hypersonic something. For a defense company, maybe that's a drone or an autonomous vehicle, something of that nature. And so it's something that in order to have the end product that we all see and appreciate, unless it's like a biologic, it probably goes through some sort of manufacturing method at some instance. So pretty much like the world around us is filled with things that have been machined in some aspect. And that's where kind of we sit. We're in the business of making things that serve like a greater purpose or that fit into some larger product.
That was awesome. So Justin, when you see the momentum that kind of, I don't know, some of it exists on the internet, but some of it is in real life. You know, we have things like the Reindustrialize Summit. We're just at AUSA this week. We have a bunch of folks who are talking about manufacturing, making things here in the U.S. again. Yeah. I'm kind of curious, as someone who's actually doing this, how much of this is real? Are you seeing change in the kinds of companies that are entering the space and what they're actually doing? Or is it still kind of at the level of conversation right now? Like, how much is translating into your world?
Yeah, I'm sure there's activity that I'm not aware of. What I am aware of is a lot of, let's just, again, not to pick on anyone in particular, but like, let's say in the defense industry. So a founder has an idea, we're going to make this a drone, because for simplicity's sake, and maybe they're trying to figure out how do we mass produce these at scale. So maybe that involves like 3D printing some parts, maybe it involves some assembly work of different fashions. I think people are starting to realize it's difficult to find components that we need for like a bespoke product without it being customized and made by like a subcontract manufacturer, which is what we are. I haven't seen a whole lot of activity focused on this segment of the supply chain. There's a lot on the end product. We need something viable that's going to offer some degree of deterrence or solve some problem that we have with a product that's on the other side of the fence. But not a lot of people are looking at how do we make all the bits and pieces at scale to allow us to make tens of thousands. And so where I get concerned is when I hear these numbers getting thrown out of like, we need 1 million fill in the blank. And it's like, cool, well, each of the things that you're describing takes 150 pieces. And so now we're talking an exponential number, and that's just for one platform. While there's activity on how do we get the design engineered in such a way that we can mass produce it, that's great, but you still deal with the fundamental problem of making the actual parts. I haven't seen a lot of investment, quite frankly, besides the part that's actually making parts for companies that have those ambitions to be able to get into the thousands and tens of thousands range of products. I think the concept, I think everyone agrees, like reshoring, reindustrializing, it's a semi-popular thing to talk about these days, but I haven't seen a whole lot of like net new machine shops stood up. There's a very strong industrial base, and I talked to a handful of these folks, privately owned businesses that have been doing this for 10, 15, 20, sometimes longer years. I always say they're kind of the unsung heroes of the industrial base that never get the recognition they've deserved. They're the people who are actually making the cool defense hardware that we need. But as a macro view, those are starting to go away because they're not able to stay in business because of fluctuations in demand. Maybe people are aging out. And so we're headed toward a real supply problem as demand starts to ramp up. And hopefully we don't have like a global event like COVID again or another war or anything like that, because then we're going to be in a whole lot of trouble in terms of our ability to mass produce things. We're already struggling to keep up.
Maybe just, it sounds like a machine's maybe kicking in a gear behind you there. Give us the...
Yeah, so we have a Lamborghini for the shop next door. They work on very expensive cars, and they just, I get a oogle over it every day when I look out my window.
There's a little sales pitch for anybody considering working at Isembard.
Yes, sponsoring the Steam Zone soon, Lamborghini.
We've been hearing they're in the market for podcasts.
I'll accept a free ride.
Yeah, I want to try something different here. Sometimes we'll do like Justin's call for startups. I actually want to try something different. Let's say someone wants to answer the call, because we meet these people every day, young people who they're graduating university, or they're graduating from a trade school, or they're graduating high school, and they're like, I want to go to college, I want to get in the game. Give Justin's playbook for somebody who they want to reindustrialize America, they want to be in on the manufacturing renaissance here in this country. What if you had to start from scratch, if you were in their shoes, what would you do?
Depends on what their end goal is. I think if it's somebody with the ambition of, hey, I want to like have a business, maybe there's an entrepreneurial bent and they're like, manufacturing is the industry I want to be involved in, but I want to be a business owner. I would say for them, one way that they can do it is partnering with us, because part of our business model is to franchise machine shops. And so historically, franchising and manufacturing haven't really gone together. There's a scene, in, if y'all are familiar with the movie Founder, which is the kind of the history of McDonald's, there's kind of this vision of what that's going to be, and it's like every small town in the U.S. is going to have a church, a school, and McDonald's. We basically want to be the fourth business and an Isembard factory. We're trying to make it really easy where you don't have to deal with all the peripheral things that come along with starting a business from scratch, de-risking it for folks, and then giving them a playbook of, we've already vetted, like, these are the best machines, this is the best programming software, we have access to talent, we have access to engineering folks, we'll help with the financial setup and all those different logistics that come with starting a business. And then they can do what hopefully they want to do, which is make things, because that's what we're all here to do. So that's one of the beauties of like Isembard as a business. We have everyone from software engineers to hands-on engineering folks, but everybody makes parts, which is a wonderful thing. Like, we all have gotten our hands real dirty with the dust of aluminum and have all sorts of fluids that are in the machines all over ourselves. But I think it's important to be close to that. I would say another avenue is if somebody just has the ambition to work within this industry and maybe not be a business owner, getting into CNC programming is an excellent way to do that. You can go to a machine shop, you'll probably be allowed to sweep the floor initially, and then you'll kind of have to progress, and it's going to be really dependent on the more senior folks that are there. There's not a lot of well-charted pathways for folks to just make entry, and that's something that we're trying to help solve as well by creating some really clear pathways, whether you're on the entrepreneurial side or you're just somebody that would love to work around this and within this industry. It's like, come, we'll map the pathway for you.
Amazing. Justin, really appreciate that. If folks want to learn more, maybe they want to become an Isembard franchisee, where can they learn more?
You can reach out to me directly, isembard.com. There is a tab and that is just exclusively for franchisees. We'll be doing some pretty aggressive recruiting efforts for our franchisees, especially here in the U.S. That's already kind of underway in the U.K., but just crossed some legal hurdles with franchising here in the States. And so we're basically full steam ahead now.
Steam ahead. The pun is intended. Thank you for joining us here on the Steam Zone, Justin. We're excited to have you back anytime, and thanks for what you're doing.